Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrew,
And I'm Rachel.
and we are Picture the Scene podcast. We are a true crime podcast aiming to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. We bring you a new episode on a weekly basis, mainly focusing on lesser-known crimes from the UK and Ireland. However, at times we expand into cases from anywhere in the world, and all ones that are well known. As we are a true crime podcast, listener caution is always advised, and today there's no exception, so please be aware. If you like what in fact, today there might be some very graphic violence described.
Might be.
I can't remember what I wrote, how I described it. I think I cut most of it out because it's a bit too gratuitous, but I may have left some in. So please be aware, people. If you like what you hear, please do follow us on whatever social media platform you prefer. Subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform of choice. And if you have the capability, give us a rating and review as well. It means the world to us. Now, if you like us that much that you want to support us, you can do so for less than the price of a cup of tea or coffee on Patreon, with our lowest tier starting at £1 per month. We release bonus content every month. The links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes, or visit patreon.com/scenepod. That's patreon.com/SCENEPOD. Now, we do also, where possible, release our episodes a week early for our Patreon supporters. So unlike Dr. Sam Beckett, you don't need to put right what once went wrong to hear us a week in advance. All you have to do is support us on Patreon. Feel these time travel references are getting a bit more obscure, Rachel. How have you been since we last spoke?
Well, first of all, can I say that was a very well polished intro.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Yeah. All good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. Can't grumble. Life goes on, doesn't it?
Indeed. Indeed it does. Glad
I
that you
am
can't grumble. I can't wait for you to return to the days of being sparkly though.
I am sparkly. I tell you what I'm not though, Rachel. One of our listeners reached out to us on Twitter and they wanted a few photographs of us because they want to see what we look like. Now,
Uh-oh.
unfortunately, she described me as a hairy biker. Now, I think secretly I won't mind being a hairy biker, but I'm not a hairy biker, so I'm
Did she use the
sparkly,
word
but not hairy.
gruff as well?
Rough, yes. This gruff. I like that.
But I love the fact that they suggested I was exactly as they pictured. So yeah, winning at life.
Yes.
My voice matches my appearance.
And we love interaction with our listeners. It makes us realize that people do listen to us. So we're happy to have a conversation on almost anything.
Yeah, especially when they pay me compliments and don't insult me. Happy days.
Yes. I thought he's going to say, and they insult you. So,
I was, but then I thought about it and then I thought, no, best not to. Start this is the episode 2 of a new season. We need to be a little kinder to each other. We can wait until we get towards the mid-season break when we can be like a bit meaner,
yeah.
maybe.
Okay, Grant. We don't have a mid-season break, but yeah, we can wait towards we get towards
Well,
that.
we might need one this season.
Yes. So, Rachel, the big question on everyone's lips is, are you ready for some true crime?
Oh, I was born ready. But hey, before we get into it, I just actually wanted to mention Murder Mile you spoke about last week.
Oh no, was it not to your taste?
Quite the opposite, actually, Mr. O. Whilst I didn't listen to the case you suggested, I saw there was a 10-part miniseries based on the Soho Strangler, so I went with that.
Ah, yeah, I'm halfway through now. What did you think about it?
It's great. Like there was so much detail you didn't mention on all the other things, like the sound effects, the humor. It's like the production quality of an audio drama, but with that true crime element as well. I'm not actually usually a fan of older crimes, but this had me hooked.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention it because often I hear recommendations on other pods and I always intend to listen, but I never do. So I wanted to let our listeners know that this is a great addition and definitely worth your time.
For sure. It's always good to make sure we keep our listeners aware of excellent shows out there. And Murder Mile definitely is an excellent show.
Yeah, so thanks for the recommendation.
No bother. So let's get into the story then.
Yeah, absolutely. We can start now. Sorry.
It's been a while since I've been there. So I'm going back to Ireland today, Rachel. And
Nice.
I'd like to take us to Saturday, the 16th of January, 2016. And there was a couple, Brian O'Dwyer and Mary Costigan, who were out taking a stroll by the Grand Canal at Ardcuff in County Kildare. It was the early afternoon. It was dry but cold. It was around 5 degrees Celsius, which is around 41 degrees Fahrenheit. And it wasn't a day that you leave your coat home for sure, Rachel. Definitely not.
Not in January and in
No.
Ireland, ever.
Yeah, definitely not. So the couple, they were walking along, chatting, enjoying spending some quality time together, as you do, when one of them spots what looks like a new suitcase floating in the canal.
Oh, God.
Possibly. So after a little debate between the pair, Brian decided to fish the case out of the canal and see what was inside of it.
Wow.
He managed to stretch and grab a hold of it, stating to his partner Mary that there must be something inside it because it was quite heavy.
Oh, no.
After he managed to drag it onto the towpath next to the canal, Mary came alongside him as he unzipped the case to see what was inside of it. He then stumbled back slightly, thinking he knew what he was looking at, but he looked to his partner Mary for assurance of what he thought it was or if he was wrong. And he said to her, "Is that a body?" And she just simply replied with, "I think so." So what they could see was a plastic bag filled with red liquid and what looked like human skin inside.
So the plastic bag was like in the suitcase, like covering the whole body or just separate to the
Yeah,
body?
we'll get it. No, they thought it was a
Okay.
plastic bag, but it was actually like those plastic wrappings you get. No, like if you're using it as like a dust cover or stuff like that,
Yeah.
like that type of thing. It was,
Ah, okay, got you. Yeah.
but to them they thought it was a plastic bag. So Brian immediately got on the phone to the Gardaí and simply said to them, "I think we found a body." Brian O'Dwyer was right. What he had stumbled upon with his partner was in fact a body, not a complete body, Rachel, but a torso wrapped in clear plastic and bound together with red ratchet straps. Later, Deputy State Pathologist Dr. Michael Curtis would state that the limbs and head of the body had been cut off with a high-speed mechanical saw, so a chainsaw, basically.
I don't know whether my stomach was able to cope with this morning.
Hopefully you can.
If I go very silent, I've had to dash off.
Yes. And while Murder Mike does do great sound effects, we're not going to be doing any vomiting sound effects today.
No, please. And thank you.
When the Garda arrived, they had little to go on. There was no crime scene, just a suitcase with no head or limbs, so they didn't know the identity of the body. All they could tell was that it was a white adult male. So who was this man? And how did he get into the suitcase? Was it foul play? Was it accidental? Or was it natural causes that caused him to die?
I don't think it's natural causes. He's got no head or limb.
No, but it could be natural causes that caused him to die. Does it mean
Oh, and then somebody panicked.
yes?
Right. Okay. Interesting idea. Still don't believe it's natural causes. I'm wondering how long he'd been there for as well. I'm sure you'll let us know.
I shall indeed. But I guess what I need to do to start with is to introduce you to a few new characters in this story, Rachel, so that we can solve that puzzle, including the questions that you just asked. Firstly, let me introduce you to Kenneth O'Brien, or Ken, as he likes to be known. He was in a long-term relationship with Ima Dunn, and they had a young son called Charlie. Prior to this date in early 2016, Ken had been working mostly for the last couple of years in Australia. He was a JCB driver, a mechanic, and a devoted father to his son Charlie.
Oh.
Well, while he had been working in Australia, his partner stayed behind in their home on Leyland Road in Clondalkin, which is an area of Dublin. He regularly sent money home so she could pay the mortgage and other bills and bring up their son. But the Christmas that had just gone, so Christmas of 2015, he moved back to Ireland to work there and be back with his family for good.
That must have been a nice Christmas, like for everyone to be reunited, knowing that he wouldn't be traveling halfway across the world again.
Yes, definitely. Now, his partner, Ima, she had planned to have some celebrations for her 30th birthday on the 15th of January, the day before the body turned up, but he had cancelled them because Ken had told her he had to head off to Limerick for a few days with a job. So it's cancelled for a few days. Early in the morning of the 15th, as his partner was leaving the house with their son, his son had kissed him goodbye, and he said to his partner not to forget he'll be home late that evening. He was, however, still at home between 10 and 11 a.m. as he let the Wi-Fi installer into his house, and then he left into it and left the house. Throughout the day of the 15th, as was normal between Ken and Ima, they shared text messages, just ordinary banter, she'll describe it as. But he suddenly stopped replying at 1:30 p.m., something which was really unusual for him. So later on that afternoon, about 4 or 5 p.m.ish, she tried to call Ken, but his phone was turned off. So now she started to worry. About 3:30 a.m. that night, well, you know, the early hours of the 16th of January, she got a text message from a number she didn't recognize. And it said this: "Lost my phone today. I'm staying in a hotel tonight, having a drink, talk tomorrow."
Oh, wow.
And she thought that was odd because it was not like him at all. But given it was really late, like 3:30 in the morning, she left it for the time being.
She might have left it, but I'm sure she was seething as well. On the like, I'm guessing that most of her mind and body were telling her this isn't right, but there was a part of her going, if it is right, I'm going to kill him when he gets home.
Quite possibly, yeah. So the following morning, however, she got another text message from the number, same number, but this one really did have her worried. It said this: "So here it is. I'm heading for the ferry today. I can't handle being home and I want out. I met someone else. She came to Ireland yesterday. I met her today and I'm going with her." Yes. So this obviously, Rachel, it really worried Ima. She knew Ken had in the past been unfaithful to her, but that's not what was worrying her, believe it or not. She also knew, because she'd been with Ken for years, she also knew that Ken was very particular about his text messages, making sure his spelling and punctuation was always spot on. And this time it had a lot of errors.
How often do you hear this as well? Like, I'm guessing you're going to go on to say that it was Ken who was found in the suitcase, and the killer has, picked up the phone, or potentially not in this case because he isn't able to text off of Ken's number, but they've kind of just picked up the phone, just sent a message without thinking twice about how messages usually come, whether there are kisses, what a husband and wife might call each other, instead of "Hey, Ima," it could have been "Hey, babe." I would know immediately if somebody else was texting on behalf of my other half, because we have a certain like way that, you just get used to talking to each other, don't you? And you just hear it so often. In a case that I covered last year, there was, one of the parents said, well, I knew something was wrong because she was always with her phone and then she stopped texting. And it's just behavior that as a parent, as a partner, you're just used to and familiar with. And the killers are often caught out because they're outside of that pattern of behavior, trying to, still connect the dots, but it's not working.
Exactly. Just how you're exactly right, Rachel. Just how when people have certain styles of talking and have certain ways of messaging too. So like if it wasn't my wife, I would know exactly that it wasn't her messaging me.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
Because she's not told you, like, did you put the bins out before saying "love you, babe"?
Yeah, exactly. So now that's why she wasn't worried about the actual message, because she didn't think it was him. So she was now actually convinced it wasn't Ken who was messaging her, and she didn't know what to do, Rach. She was out of her mind with worry, so she started phoning around his friends to see if anyone had seen him or knew anything. After she had been unsuccessful several times, she eventually managed to get some information from one of his friends, Paul Wells. Now, Paul told her that Ken had been seeing someone else, and then, to prove it, he forwarded some photos he had on his phone to Ima, some of them intimate with Ken and another woman, that he said Ken had sent to him so he could prove to her that Ken was cheating on her. That's a good friend, isn't it? But
Yeah, I don't quite know where this is going. Like, why would you do that if you're a pal of Ken's? And yeah, there's something going to be a bit sinister about this, isn't there?
is it Ken in the case? It might not be. But so Ima would later say that she felt weak when she saw them because she knew Ken had been unfaithful in the past, and she had suspected something was happening when he was over in Australia too, but she never really knew for sure. She just suspected it. But she also knew, Rachel, that right now, in that moment in time, they were both getting on really great, and that Ken was home for good. So anything that happened in Australia can't have been happening anymore because it was so far away.
Yeah, and that he'd come home. It was a fresh start. They just needed to move forward.
Exactly. So, and she even said to Wells, poor Wells, there's something not right here. So that afternoon, a few hours after the body was found in a suitcase, Amy reported Ken missing to the Garda. So the next day, on the 17th, with Paul Wells, the only one who was giving her any information at all, even if she didn't fully believe it, she met up with him outside McDonald's at Liffey Valley. Now, Liffey Valley is a shopping centre, for those who don't know, and in Dublin, well, outskirts of Dublin. So Paul proceeded to show her the photos again to prove it was Ken in the photos.
Jeez.
And he said to her that she's probably just in some hotel room somewhere with a woman. However, when Ken's mum, Susan, saw the news reports that they'd found a torso in a canal, she said to her husband, I hope it doesn't mean anything, because she knew her son had worked in a garage in that area in the past. So sadly, Rachel, you guessed it already, a few days later, DNA results would bring devastation to Ken's family and partner. Then they would show that the torso was Ken's.
Wow. I mean, the killer did a really crap job of like hiding it, didn't he? For it to have been discovered literally the next day.
You probably didn't realise that if you put a fastened
No.
up case, probably a plastic one as well, in water, it's going to float, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, they never had rubber ducks when there was a kid in the bath. But anyway, the police, they had no leads or clues, Rach. Ken wasn't a criminal. He didn't associate with that type of person. And up to a month before, he'd been in Australia for 3 years. And he only ever came back at Christmas and on his son's birthday. So he only came back twice a year over 3 years. And while by now they knew someone had chopped him up with a chainsaw, they didn't have his arms, legs, or head, so they didn't know how he died. And at that time, they had no forensic evidence or CCTV, so they had nothing. So they went with what they could do. They started examining his bank accounts to see if that would lead them anywhere. And you know what, Rachel? It did lead them somewhere. Can you guess where it led them?
Straight to his best friend.
Paul Wells, yes. It led them to Paul Wells, the same man who had spoken with Ima when she was searching for him.
Wow.
It turns out that while Ken was in Australia, he spent his money mainly on two things. The first one was money he sent back to Ima for the mortgage and childcare and whatnot. And the second one was to Paul Wells. And actually, Rachel, over his last 18 months in Australia, he'd sent more to Paul than to his partner.
What?
I know. It turns out he sent him more than 52,000 euros over that 18-month period. And that's a serious chunk of change, isn't it?
I mean, what are you going to uncover here? I feel like obviously there's some sort of bribery going on.
Yeah, I don't know, Rachel. We'll see. Well, it was actually just over twice the amount he sent to Ima for the mortgage and childcare. So he sent twice as much to Paul.
Yeah.
So let's see how they became friends, shall we? They became friends when Ken used to work in a garage in Ardcliff, the same one his mum thought about earlier. And they'd met there and became friends. But does that mean that he killed him? And let me ask you a question, Rachel. Why would you kill someone who kept sending you that amount of cash? And also, probably importantly, why was he sending him in the cash?
You kill him if he threatened to stop paying you.
Possibly, yeah. I tell you what, the Garda didn't know the answers to these questions. And they didn't have enough to arrest Paul, so the investigation continued. A few days later, on January 22nd, the case progressed, only a little bit, but it still progressed. Some 20 kilometres north of where Ken's body was found, a man, now McDermott, was walking his dog, and he was at Pike's Bridge in Maynooth. Now, the bridge was going over the Royal Canal, and he spotted what he thought in the canal was a chainsaw. So he informed the police. And that's a pretty good citizen, because most people would be like, why are people chucking the rubbish away? But he informed the police and he recovered it, but he didn't have his chain with it. So it held little forensic value to them. The big break for the Garda came 2 days later when a fisherman was fishing in the Grand Canal in Salins, which is not far from where Ken's body was found. And his line caught on something. It was a supermarket shopping bag that he thought looked suspicious, and he was aware that the police were looking for body parts because it had been in the news. So he contacted the Gardaí. Now, Detective Garda, Gerald Byrne, was called to the scene, and upon investigation, he thought he could see a flesh-coloured object in the bag. So he called on police divers to recover it and search the area for any more bags. Inside the original bag was part of a lower leg with a foot attached to it, and the divers found 3 more bags, all different body parts in them, 9 different body parts in total. One bag contained the arms in 4 sections, the legs also in 4 parts with the feet attached were found in 2 more bags, and a fourth bag contained the head, and the head had a bullet inside it. So definitely not natural causes.
No.
One of the upper arms was tattooed with the name Ken. So they figured, but his hands were never found actually. But
why would you get your own name tattooed on you?
No, I did actually.
Don't mean to speak ill of the dead.
I was thinking that maybe unless he had like I'm on another arm. I'm not sure to tell you the truth, but the police were pretty confident that this was Ken. And after further testing, it was Ken. When they conducted a post-mortem on the body parts, they found that Ken died from a gunshot wound to the head that the pathologist described as being instantly fatal.
Wow.
The pathologist could tell from the contact entry wound that when he had been shot, the muzzle of the gun was pressed against Ken's head, leaving him with no chance of survival. And as the bullet had travelled downward slightly, in Poe's head, the pathologist could determine that the gun had been pointing downwards when fired. So it was likely that whomever shot Ken was doing it from above. So maybe Ken was either on his knees at the time or lying down on the floor. So with the bank account information, the details that Ima had given the police about the conversation she's had with Paul, and the fact that Paul, it was widely accepted, and actually he didn't deny it himself, that Paul was a member of the IRA. He had served time in prison previously on weapons charges, on guns charges. Focus fully turned to him. Unsurprisingly, Rachel, would you say?
Yeah, I'm definitely not surprised. Paul was not Ken's friend.
But there was one problem though, Rachel. They still didn't have enough evidence to actually arrest him.
You're joking me.
Well, no, because they had the body. Yeah, they had the body parts. They had the chainsaw, but without the chain, and it'd been in the water, so no prints or anything, no forensics. They didn't have a crime scene, and even though he had his past, it didn't mean that he was guilty of murder.
Well, I wonder where that mobile phone was with the random text messages, like, and obviously the gun, like, hoping that the police could find those.
Yeah, definitely. Let's skip forward a few days, shall we, to the 5th of February, Rachel. And this is when the Gardaí finally has some movement on Ken's death. So on that day, Paul Wells, but not Paul Wells Sr., Paul Wells Jr., so his son. So I'm going to refer to him as Junior going forward to avoid confusion.
Yeah.
He would walk into a Garda station and he confessed to police that his father had told him that he had killed Ken and he had chopped his body up with a chainsaw. He would go on to tell the Gardaí that he had got a phone call from his brother on the 16th of January asking him to meet his father in a Tesco car park. He said that when he met his father around 7 p.m. in the car park, they drove towards Stratham Village and that Paul Sr. seemed on edge. He said this about his father. He was sweating all the time. I thought I was going to be shot. I mean, that's nice to think my father's on edge, so he's going to shoot me, isn't it? But he then went on to describe how his father pulled up next to the canal on Salem's Road, so the same place where the body parts were found, and he went to the boot of his car, and a few moments later, he heard 2 splashes. The next day, the police would find the rest of the chainsaw bits after Junior had told them where to look for them, and they would arrest Senior and search his home and property.
Oh, bravo, Junior. That couldn't have been easy, like dobbing your father in, could it?
No, it couldn't have been. So when he was arrested, he would tell the Gardaí that he was Ken's friend and that he wouldn't have killed him. He would be interviewed a total of 15 times over the following 6 days. Initially, he was very talkative, saying that the two were good friends and would call each other bud and that he was like an older brother to Ken. He said that he hadn't seen him since the Monday before he went missing, when he had met him for a cup of coffee. He said that he told Ima what he did because his gut instinct was that he had not wanted to come home from Australia, Ken that is, so he had done a runner, saying that Ken always confided in him, and he had told him about 3 different women he was having an affair with: a neighbour in Ireland, a woman from Rwanda that lived in Ireland, and an Irish woman that he met in Australia.
Oh, wow.
He would go on to say that on the day in question, he had taken his wife and son to the train station as they were going on a trip to Cork. He had then gone and done some window shopping before going home to cook some chops. That his other son, Gary, had visited him, but he ended up watching TV to 2 a.m. before falling asleep, and he continually denied having anything to do with the murder. However, it's a good however, the Garda was obtaining lots of evidence while they were interviewing him. They found CCTV that was showing Biden's SIM card on the morning Ken went missing. The same SIM card that was used to text Ima, and the number linked to that card used a cell tower that was close to Paul's house. At 5:38 on the Saturday morning, when he told police he was asleep, more CCTV would show him driving southbound on the M50 motorway, and later on in that morning, he would be caught again on more CCTV buying black bin bags and bleach.
The sneaky bugger.
Yes. He would be shown evidence of the money transfers from Ken to him, and also even more CCTV showing him withdrawing 20,000 euros of that money in the weeks leading to Ken's death. He would be told that blood was found in the boot of his car and in his shed, and that blood later turned out to be Ken's, but he continued to deny any involvement.
What on earth had Ken done to pay him 20,000 euro?
Well, 52. We'll get onto that.
Okay.
It's interesting, but it was only on the 7th interview that he was told what Junior had told the police. Basically, that Junior had confessed.
Wow.
It was only then that he shut up, stopped being talkative, and he replied with the same answer to the questions: "I'm not saying anything at this time." So when the 7th interview ended, though, and he was being taken back to his cells, he turned around to the Garda who had been interviewing him, saying this: "I'll tell you everything in the morning. What happened to Kenneth is tearing me asunder." But, Rachel, that wasn't quite true. Later that evening, he called in the Garda on duty to his cell, and he confessed to killing Ken. He would go on to call Ken a bit of a head case, and that because he had links to the IRA, Paul that is, not Ken assumed that he'd be willing to commit a murder for him. So that's what the money was for. Yeah, he said that Ken wanted him to kill his partner, Ima, so that he could take their son Charlie to Australia and start a new life.
Oh my God.
He did say, though, that he'd never kill a woman, so he had no intention of doing it, and that Ken had arranged to meet him in the shopping centre that morning, the morning that Ken went missing, to swap a SIM card that Paul had bought, the SIM card which we talked about a moment ago, and for a gun that Ken had. However, as Paul had no intention of killing Ima, he didn't meet him. He said that Ken turned up later that afternoon at his house and had gotten into a fight because Paul didn't want to kill Ima. He said that in the fight they struggled, and he'd grabbed a gun when Ken had dropped it and just shot it out of fear and panic. He said that he wasn't thinking straight, so he chopped the body up to get rid of it.
I'm not believing this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, he was arrested and it went to trial, with him pleading not guilty. And I suppose I'm not going to go over the trial because I've spoken about a lot of the evidence that they had already, but the only other bit of evidence that I've not mentioned that was interesting was from his other son, Gary. So he testified that his dad had called him that day to tell him not to come home that evening. Yeah. And the next day when he did go home, his dad was cleaning the outside deck with bleach. He said that he'd been given a bag of rubbish to throw away that contained cardboard covered in a red liquid, obviously blood, and another bag with chainsaw parts that he was given to give to his brother Paul Jr. to dispose of. So he would be found guilty of murder and sentenced to life. So in Ireland, it's slightly different, Rachel. Judges don't give a minimum term. They just give life. But the minimum amount of time before parole can be sought is 12 years. That doesn't mean that every killer gets out after 12 years. And from the stats I could find, the average sentence for murder in Ireland, so a sentence where someone actually stays in prison, is 20 years.
Wow.
So the only exception to this in Ireland is what they call capital murder. So capital murder, do you know what that is, Rach?
First, like the equivalent of first degree?
No, capital murder is when I didn't know about it until I heard it, which is it's when it's either the murder of a guard officer, a diplomat, or
Oh, okay.
yeah, or murder for political reasons or things similar to that.
Yeah.
So that type of murder in Ireland does have a minimum sentence, and that minimum sentence is 40 years. That's
Wow.
that's a deterrent, isn't it?
Absolutely. And like it's necessary, isn't it? Because the Garda are trying to keep you safe and
Yeah.
you're taking their life when they're risking theirs every day. It's yeah, and also politically driven crime. It does need to be punished, but um interesting that the life imprisonment for non-capital murder or any other murder is just so blanketly like low.
Yeah, well, it's just because it's so there's no minimum term, so it's up to. I think the theory behind it, they're petitioning now to raise it to 20 years, I believe. But the theory behind it is because they can apply for parole after 12 years, doesn't mean they're going to get it. So in theory, they don't have to release someone; they could just keep him in forever.
Yeah,
That's the theory behind it. But Rage, there's a little bit more of this story to go through, believe it or not.
indeed.
So do you remember Junior? Well, he would
Yeah.
also be arrested. And
What?
now he would be arrested on impeding the apprehension of a criminal. He would plead not guilty, basically by disposing of the chainsaw parts and whatnot, and taking his dad to dispose of the body parts. He would plead not guilty, seeing that he did it because he feared his dad would shoot him. However, the prosecution would find evidence that his dad gave him €11,000 for it. He always denied this and said he gave it his dad straight back again, but they didn't believe him. So he would be found guilty and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
Wow.
And it's actually really weird. I don't know why I didn't put this in the script. A story came out where he was saying that he had to shoot his son because if he didn't shoot his son, the IRA said they'd shoot him. And he also, like, when there was a trial, Paul Jr., so Jr.,
Yeah.
asked the guard officer to handcuff him so that he couldn't attack his dad in the courtroom. It was all
Oh my
right there.
God.
Lots of drama, yeah.
And I
So
guess he got such a short, small sentence because he'd helped the police like nail the conviction against his dad. Because two
yeah,
years is nothing for helping dispose of a body, really, is it?
yeah,
Perverting
no.
the course of justice and all that.
Yeah, no, it's not really. Probably, yeah. So what do you think of that story then, mate?
I find myself frustrated that we never got probably the truth because I actually don't believe that Ken would have offed his wife. Obviously don't know a lot about him, but I just feel like that was a really extreme plot twist that Paul tried to throw in the end. Could it have been that, Ken was paying him to keep secrets? I don't know. And then one day just turned around and went, I'm not paying you anymore. You're meant to be my friend. And he had a moment of madness and shot him.
Yeah, I don't know. It never actually came out. So the prosecution in the trial, they alluded to Paul killed Ken over the money, over an argument about the money that Ken wanted it back, but Paul said no. But they could never really prove that. That was just a suggestion as to why. And Ken never, ever, Paul never, ever admitted as to
No.
why. He always took to buy the story that it was to kill Irma.
And the thing is as well, like £52,000 is a lot to pay for an assassination. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't quite believe it. Whether he was saying to Paul, I'm going to siphon some money off to you because I can't keep it anywhere that I can't access it. And when I'm ready, I'm going to run away with, my missus and my new missus and a wad of that cash. So it'd be great if I can come up and get it off you when payday comes. And maybe Paul again like had a moment of madness and thought, why do you get your happy ending? Like, but again, to shoot him is so extreme. Like, instead of just warning his wife that
It
he
was,
was so promiscuous.
but given the background that it has,
Yeah, with the
it,
IRA, connections with the IRA.
yeah, it might not be. And he even called himself a member of the IRA, so it's not me. Like, it's not just gossip.
No,
He openly admitted it.
so odd. I just feel like he had a lot of time to concoct that backstory, didn't he? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden spill his guts to the prison officers.
And he went into so, if you like gory stuff, listeners, he went into so much detail about what he did after Ken died. I haven't included that. That's why I said at the beginning I couldn't remember if I included it or not, but no, I haven't included that because it made me not feel great. So yeah, it's out there, but it's an odd one, Rachel. It's an odd one. He could actually, I don't know, but this was 2016, so in theory, he could be out in 2028.
That's wild, isn't it? Like, take a man's life. And in such a brutal way again. Like, he didn't just kill him or push him off a bridge or like, he shot him and then dismembered him and then spread him across multiple sites. And he could be walking free in 12 years. For me, that's dangerous.
And they never found his hands. Actually,
Oh,
what he did with Ken's hands is he said that after he disposed of the body parts and the chainsaw and whatnot, the next day he went in his shed and he realized he forgot the hands and they were still on the shelf in his shed. So he just went to a river and threw them in the river. But I guess that shows the mentality of the man. Like, oh, oops, forgot these. Just get rid of them.
he almost seems as well like he's got a bit of bragging rights to say, "Oh yeah, I forgot the hands, so I just chucked them in the river." Like, so like senseless, isn't it? Again, another senseless crime over something that we'll never get to the bottom of, which just doesn't sit right. But really interesting story and not one I've heard. So again, you've opened my mind and told me something new. So thank you.
Yeah, I thought I'd better go back to Ireland because it's been a while. We always say UK and Ireland, and we never cover it. And I live here, so I read about the cases. I guess I'm just a little bit afraid that I'll get them wrong because it's harder to access the court stuff in Ireland than it is the UK.
And there's always that element, isn't there, that you are only as good as what you're researching and discovering in the early days of your script writing. And one paper, one news outlet or television reporter gets something wrong, a lot of other newspapers, outlets, reporters follow that pattern on and continue along, that storyline. So it's it for me, it's always a risk that we take, isn't it? That
Oh,
we
definitely a bit.
get the ages right, get the siblings correct, location and stuff like that. We're at the mercy of what's out there in the press. So never fear. Just bring it forward. And we are always happy as well to correct ourselves if we are misinformed. It's never intentional. It's yeah.
Exactly. And so shall I wrap this up then, Rachel?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this has been season 3, episode 2, called Buds for Life. And for one last time, if it's safe to do so, I'd like you to relax. Close your eyes and picture the scene. You're walking along a canal, and they're never the cleanest of places anyway, but you see a suitcase in the water. What do? Do you open it, or do you just quickly walk along and leave it alone? What would you do, Rachel?
Uh, I think I'd leave it alone, I'd
I
probably
think I
call
probably would.
someone. I'd probably
Yeah.
call someone, like the park warden, the police,
Or even,
whatever felt natural at the time, I would go ahead and do. But I'm not the kind of person, albeit I'm very curious, I'm not the kind of person that could deal with finding something.
yeah,
And it always scares me, when you hear of these um walks that people do when they're hunting for like evidence, and ultimately they're trying to find a missing person. Yeah. So they're scouring the fields and the rivers and the banks and, you know, the outdoors. It like, don't get me wrong, if it was a neighbor, a friend, a family member, I'm sure I would be there helping in some way, but I'm not sure that I could be out looking for them because I would just be in fear of what could be found, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, Rach. So with that, thank you everyone, and until next time, we shall pretty horrific case next week actually, but until next time,
Oh wow,
stay
that turned quickly.
yes, until next time, stay happy and goodbye.
Try and stay happy, guys. Bye.